The seat of Azem, a position of great prestige within the Convocation 14 that always went to those select few who treasured exploration, discovery, and initiative above all else. To those bearing the title of Azem, all walks of life and the people there within were to be respected, and if it was within someone's power to do good, then they must do so, lest chaos always prevail over harmony. In the modern day, none embody the principles of this position more than an organization that is still relatively new. This group is called the Adventurers Guild, and today we'll discuss not only their origins, but how they unknowingly inherited the will of Azem, the Traveler. In all honesty, the Adventurers Guild is rather young, with its roots only going back about 20 years. The initial formation of this guild began shortly after the fall of Alamigo and the subsequent Garlean occupation in the year 1557 of the Sixth Astral Era. The Garlean Empire's hostile takeover of Eorzea was now sitting on the doorstep of Gridania, and this made all the ruling city-states reasonably nervous. With the very real threat of war on the horizon, Gridania, Limsa-Lominsa, Ul'dah, and Ishgard all began to consolidate their power in preparation for an invasion. However, this sudden shift in resource distribution and military might had an adverse effect on the people's day-to-day lives. Branches of the military that would normally patrol and slay monsters were moved to defend against Garlean forces, leaving no one to protect their stations. Sellswords that usually relied on commissions from city-states were out of work as large amounts of funding were moved toward the war effort. The city-states of Eorzea had officially raised their shields against the Empire, but with all this focus on defense came a lack of attention to the common man. This created a time of strange peace. The city-states of Eorzea weren't bickering like usual, but they also weren't progressing either. Like stagnant air, the socio-political climate started to get nervous, as Eorzea waited to see Garlemald's next move. However, there was one mercenary leader that looked upon this social stasis and decided that he would take matters into his own hands. He was a Hyr named Ludwigus the Leal, and his leadership skills were well known throughout Aldenard's mercenary bands and free companies. Instead of waiting for things to return back to normal, Ludwigus decided to reshape his very own mercenary band into something brand new. He took advantage of his experience and expertise to create a system that would not only see his people fairly paid, but ensure that their commissioners weren't getting robbed either. He used all of his connections, resources, and authority to build up a group that would take on the duties that the city-states could no longer do themselves. His mercenary group would rebrand itself, and the Adventurers Guild was officially born. The Adventurers Guild was made to serve the common folk of Eorzea in a way that didn't require the strict supervision or aid of government bodies. The guild's symbol is represented by a sword, shield, and staff. The combination of these three things symbolizing the guild's diversity, making use of both might and magic. However, in the center is the shield, showing that above all else, defending the people of Eorzea is the guild's top priority. It was to be a completely autonomous group, acting as a liaison between those that needed help with something and the people that could help them. Originally, the guild was able to get farmers, caravans, and other groups into contact with mercenaries in the area that could serve as guardians for the right price. But this method of skill sharing turned out to be much more popular and efficient than anyone could have predicted. People were rapidly turning to the Adventurers Guild for day-to-day help because of the long lists of men and women that were available at that very moment. Instead of waiting for the city-state to take care of a problem, they'd pay an adventurer to handle the issue immediately. This saw the duties of the Adventurers Guild evolve. No longer were they just mercenaries or bodyguards. They were crafters, gatherers, researchers, tradesmen, and sometimes investigators. The Adventurers Guild would be given a request from anyone living within Eorzea, and that request would make its way to the right people. Those individuals would then take care of the problem in a way that didn't extort the common man, but also made sure that the adventurer could make a living as well. It's not an understatement to say that one of the biggest reasons that Eorzea didn't fall into complete chaos during the Garlean invasion and Seventh Umbral Calamity was the volume of adventurers tending to the realm's basic needs. While mercenaries and sellswords usually got a bad reputation, adventurers belonging to the guild were becoming folk heroes. This is why, despite its young age, the Adventurers Guild is held in extremely high regards by the city-states of Eorzea. Despite the copious amounts of danger, the guild romanticized the idea that anyone could do anything, and that the success of your life was in your own hands. Whether you were born wealthy or poor, talented or basic, if you had a skill people needed, the guild would get you paid. People began to wonder if a system like this would be reliable long term, but in the wake of the Seventh Umbral Calamity, more and more people needed help with almost everything. Many people would join the Adventurers Guild after losing so much. They'd try not only to make a living for themselves after the ruin of the Calamity, but also ensure that society as a whole could continue to move forward. After all, the guild gave many people who were idle the chance to continue living modestly, and that's all most citizens wanted. Those who lost everything to the Calamity were able to find new purpose, friends, and sometimes a new family within the Adventurers Guild. But as time passed, the influence and popularity of the guild would only grow. Eventually, the Adventurers Guild would stake claim to the land in Mordona, or more specifically, a small settlement called Revenant's Toll. The settlement earned its name from a massive loss of life that happened here when Midgardsormr did battle with the Garlean Empire. Few, if any, people living on the ground next to Silvertear survived, meaning that the dead had none to mourn them aside from their fellow dead. But despite the unfortunate name this settlement was given, the Adventurers Guild would use the fact that Mordona was neutral ground to grow their tiny settlement into a proper township. Through the financial assistance provided by the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, Rowena's House of Splendors, the labor of Dolmen refugees, on top of the many able-bodied hands of adventurers, the small one-tent town of Revenant's Toll had grown into a guild outpost and safe haven for all sorts of adventurers, not to mention an asylum for refugees and respectable folks. A town created by travelers to support the world. Here is where we see the will of Azem beginning to show itself in the hearts and minds of all those noble souls that dare to dream of a brighter future forged by their own hands. Their goals aren't to overthrow the city-states or become a superpower, but to travel the length and width of Eorzea in hopes of bringing as much good to the lands as they can for modest pay. Most adventurers aren't trying to become the wealthy merchants or lords of the land. They found happiness in the simpler things that life has to offer. The laughter of friends, the gratification of a hard day's work, the knowledge that innocent people can sleep soundly because of them. But many members of the Adventurers Guild wouldn't be satisfied with raising up one town, as many of them would hear of a growing settlement in the Dravanian hinterlands and almost immediately offer up their assistance. The settlement of Idyllshire began when a group of treasure hunters led by a woman named Midnight Dew would move into the abandoned ruins of Sharlayan for their potential riches. Of course, the treasure hunters ran into trouble, as various monsters and animals had taken up residence within the abandoned township. Not only that, but goblins had begun raiding and reverse engineering Sharlayan technology for their own purposes, most notably the production of cheese. There was a time when the treasure hunters and goblins would break out into skirmishes over territory, but eventually Midnight Dew would sit down with a goblin named Slowfix Cointoss. Together, they would reach an agreement and begin the creation of a new settlement together. Now, clever gobbies and brave uplanders work as many whirligigs to build upright towny town with much glitter glam. And with the advent of this settlement came the travelers of the Adventurers Guild. Hearing about the peace between Slowfix and Midnight meant that they would need help securing trade routes and disturbing monster dens. The many hands of the Adventurers Guild would assist in protecting the early settlement of Idyllshire and helping it stand on its own 2 feet. With the aid of the Adventurers Guild came the financial support of Rowena's House of Splendors, giving Idyllshire both the money and manpower to grow into a prosperous settlement. As Idyllshire advanced, Midnight began to put the days of prize fighting and Nolda behind her so she could act as one of the town's leaders. Meanwhile, Slowfix has dreams that Idyllshire will one day expand and absorb the rest of the Charlene colony, becoming a proud city, and possibly its own nation. While Idyllshire may not be founded by the Adventurers Guild like Revenant's Toll, the settlement owes its abnormally rapid development to the many travelers that heard the Song of Adventure and arrived to assist. There are many more examples of adventurers going out of their way to lift up their fellow man and carve a path for others to follow. But we'd be talking all day if I brought all of these instances up. So, as you can see, this is why the Adventurers Guild is held in such high regard. It's an organization that encourages people to travel the world, offer their services, and make right whatever they can, just like those who occupied the seat of Azem in ages past. So my friends, if you find yourself doing good work for the Adventurers Guild, know that you've inherited a will thousands of years old, and walk in the footsteps of fantastical people. After all, Azem was only a title that was passed down between many individuals. Travel the world, help who you can, feed your curiosity, and adventure to your heart's content. Do this, and the true essence of the Adventurers Guild, as well as that of Azem themselves, will be yours. So until I meet you again on your travels, stay safe, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Big shout out to my patrons, Rovakis, Monsolo97, Potato, Runatir, The Yellow Couch, Papaya Cyan, and Vivalis Oma. If you want to see more lore content in the future, share this with your friends. My dream is to share as much as I find with as many people as possible. And if you do end up helping me, thank you so much in advance. And have a wonderful day.